Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Steven here with Team Euphoric, and this is day 13 of the 80 Days to Your Dream Body course. Today's protein source is going to be beef brisket, and today's going to be a legs and abs training routine. And the theme for today's workout is going to be acute exercise variables. So right now, I'm going to be explaining how to manipulate sets, reps, intensity, time under tension, tempo, and rest periods for optimal results. Now let's get started. And while we are resting, let's discuss some acute exercise variable guidelines for people whose goal it is to improve their relative strength. First, what exactly is relative strength? This is your strength relative to your body weight, and it's going to be very important for people who compete in sports that have weight classes. If you are trying to get as strong as possible without increasing your weight, then relative strength is what you would want to train for. And the general acute exercise variable guidelines are going to be sets between 6 to 12, repetitions between 1 to 5, the intensity should be between 85 to 100% of your one repetition maximum, and the set should last somewhere between 0 to 20 seconds. With regard to the tempo, on the eccentric portion, you want to focus on slower controlled eccentric movements because this is going to allow for greater eccentric control. And also, when you perform slower eccentric movements, this is going to promote the production of your IGF-1 or your insulin-like growth factor, which is going to be great for developing strength and hypertrophy. At the bottom position, at the pause, you would want to incorporate some pauses. One of the reasons being is when you end up pausing, it is going to remove some of the elastic energy stored in the muscle tendon. Elastic energy is what helps you to lift the weight back up. As you get a stretch, it acts as a recoil. So if you pause for 2 seconds at the bottom position, that eliminates approximately 50% of the elastic energy that's stored in the muscle tendon. If you pause for 3 seconds, that eliminates approximately 80% of the elastic energy that's stored in the muscle tendon. And if you pause for 4 seconds, that virtually eliminates all of the elastic energy stored in the muscle tendon. So if you are trying to increase your relative strength, pausing at the bottom is going to make the lift much harder, and you're going to have to use more force production because you can't rely on that recoil effect. Next, we take a look at the concentric phase. On the concentric phase, if your goal is relative strength, generally you would want to perform more explosive movements to increase your force production. And then the pause at the top, it may benefit you to rest for a brief moment at the top to regain your strength and add a little bit more volume to your workouts. And then lastly, the rest periods. Rest periods with regard to relative strength is going to be between 180 to 300 seconds. And this is going to allow for greater neural recovery. When we are performing very, very high intense exercises, we're going to need that neural recovery because it's not just that our muscles are burning from the lactic acid. Instead, we need that neural focus. But those are just the guidelines for relative strength. Rest is up. Time for set number 2. And while we were resting, let's discuss some acute exercise variable guidelines for people whose goal it is to increase their absolute strength, also known as functional hypertrophy. First, what exactly is absolute strength or functional hypertrophy? This is a combination of relative strength and hypertrophy. So by focusing on absolute strength or functional hypertrophy, you're going to get stronger, but not quite as strong as if you did something like relative strength. And you will get a hypertrophic response, but not quite as much as if you were to train solely for the purpose of hypertrophy. With regard to absolute strength and functional hypertrophy, some of the guidelines for sets is going to be between 5 to 10 sets. Repetitions should be between 6 to 8. The intensity should be between 75 to 85% of your one repetition maximum. And the total time under tension, so how long it should take you to complete a set, should be somewhere between 20 to 40 seconds. Now, with regard to tempo, on the eccentric phase, once again, you want to focus on slower eccentrics. This is going to help for greater eccentric control. And again, it's going to help to promote your body's production of IGF-1 or your insulin growth-like factor, which is going to help improve things like your ability to generate strength and also your hypertrophy results. Next, at the bottom position, with regard to the pause, it would also benefit you to incorporate some pauses for absolute strength because once again, when you are focusing at the pause at the bottom stretch position, what's going to happen is you end up eliminating a lot of that elastic energy that's stored in the muscle tendon. So you're going to have to require a lot more strength in order to get the weight up. Also, the other thing with regard to pausing at the bottom is for hypertrophy purposes, when you pause in the bottom stretch position, you're going to create greater damage to the muscle, and this is damage in a good way. This is going to allow you to grow a little bit more. So by pausing at the bottom stretch position, you could get a little bit more hypertrophy, and it's going to improve your strength quite a bit as well. Next, we take a look at the concentric. The concentric, once again, we want to focus on explosiveness. That way we can generate as much force as possible. And then at the top position, we would want to focus on some pauses. This is going to allow you to regain some of your strength back, and it's going to allow you to add a little bit more volume, which is going to be important for hypertrophy. With regard to the rest periods, this one right over here is going to be between 120 to 180 seconds because we're going to need that metabolic recovery. But our rest is up. Time for set number 3. And while we are resting, let's discuss some acute exercise variable guidelines for people whose goal it is to improve hypertrophy. Hypertrophy being muscle building. So if it is your goal to build muscle, then generally your sets should be between 4 to 8, your repetitions should be between 9 to 12, the intensity of the exercise or the percentage of your one repetition maximum should be between 70 to 75% intensity. The time under tension or how long a set takes to complete should be between 40 to 70 seconds. And for the tempo, ideally the eccentric to concentric ratio should be somewhere around 2 to 1. So you want to lift the weight at half the speed that you are lowering the weight, or lower the weight at twice the speed at which you are lifting the weight. With regard to the eccentrics, generally what I find is a 2 to 4 second eccentric is going to be great. And once again, when we focus on slower eccentrics, this is going to help with your body's production of IGF-1 or your insulin-like growth factor. This is going to be important for building up hypertrophy and also strength gains. Next, at the bottom position, at the pause position at the bottom, it would benefit you to incorporate some pauses. One of the reasons is you're going to get greater muscle activation by pausing at the bottom, and also you're going to get a little bit more tearing, but tearing in the good way of the muscle fibers that are being stretched. This is also going to help to recruit more muscle fibers, which is going to be terrific for muscle hypertrophy. Then the top portion, that is the concentric, and generally what I find is between a 1 to 2 second concentric is going to be ideal. And then at the top portion, it may benefit you to pause for 1 or 2 seconds. By pausing at the top portion, what's going to happen is it's going to allow you to get a little bit of rest and recovery. You're going to be able to regain some of your strength, and you may be able to bust out a few extra repetitions, which is going to allow you to increase your total volume for that set. And with regard to hypertrophy, accumulating volume is going to be very, very important. So the more volume you get, generally, the more hypertrophic response you're going to get. And then with regard to rest periods, generally you should be resting between 90 to 120 seconds in between each set. But those are the general guidelines for hypertrophy. Our rest period is up. Time for set number 4. And while we are resting, let's discuss some acute exercise variable guidelines for people whose goal it is to improve their strength endurance or their muscular endurance. Strength endurance / muscular endurance, as the name implies, you are improving your endurance. So if you are trying to improve your endurance, generally some recommendations are your sets should be between 3 to 6, your repetitions should be 13 or more, the intensity should be between 60 to 70% of your one repetition maximum, and the time under tension or how long it takes you to complete a set should be between 50 to 120 seconds. With regard to tempo, you can get pretty creative with the tempo if your goal is going to be to improve your endurance. Generally, between a 2 to 1 ratio of eccentric to concentric, all the way to a 1 to 2 ratio of eccentric to concentric is going to be ideal. So you can get very, very creative. The eccentric, anywhere from 2 to 10 seconds. The concentric, anywhere from 2 to 10 seconds. With regard to pausing at the top or bottom position, this is going to be very dependent on the actual exercise. Because our goal is improving strength endurance or muscular endurance, what we want to do is we want to maintain as much tension on the muscle as possible. So depending on the exercise, this is going to dictate where exactly you would incorporate pauses. Let's say you are doing a squat. On a squat, most of the tension is going to be at the bottom portion after the eccentric. So when you squat, you're in that eccentric position. At the bottom part, all of your muscles are still under tension, so it would benefit you to pause at the bottom of the eccentric portion. Whereas if you are performing something like, let's say, a side lateral raise, at the side lateral raise, once you've completed the eccentric, there's not really much tension going on right over here. So it would benefit you to incorporate the pause after the concentric phase where this muscle is still maintaining a lot of tension. So if you are focusing on endurance, just remember, wherever you have the most tension on the muscle, that is where you would incorporate the pause. So it's not always going to be at the bottom of the eccentric or at the top of the concentric. And with regard to the rest periods for this one right over here, because we are working on endurance, the rest should be anywhere from 10 to 90 seconds. As you get more conditioned, you could get lower and lower toward that 10 second, but for beginners, you could start closer to the 90-second range. But rest period is up. Time for the 5th and final set. Thanks for sticking around until the end of the video. Be sure to like, share, and leave a comment as it'll help the algorithm. And if you enjoyed the content, show your support by subscribing to the channel by clicking on the icon in the bottom right corner. And if you really want to show your support, then consider becoming a member by clicking on the icon in the bottom left corner. These new high-quality videos aren't cheap to edit, and the $5 membership will really help with the video editing budget. You'll also get access to a ton of exclusive perks like early access to videos and this program design lecture playlist in the top right-hand corner. And if you want to learn how to do a one-armed pull-up, then check out the playlist on the top left corner.